I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the world's most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli is on vacation. And Andrew Kuo, 5 days a week. He's always here. He does not take days off. Andrew, it's Friday. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling even better than ever because I just swallowed some Tide Pods, injected some bleach into my veins. I'm cured, Ben. I have the light inside me.
Every day is more surreal than the next.
This is very true, actually.
It's not even stuff to get angry about or even at this point overly respond to. Like, oh my God, can you believe this? It's like, yeah, I believe it all, dude. I believe it all.
Yeah.
The President of the United States thinks that injecting disinfectant into your lungs will cure COVID. All right.
We should look into it. It's done a great job on our lungs. No one's heard that. It does a great job on tabletops, so why not our insides?
Sure, of course. But yeah, it's beyond the like, if this happened in a normal world, you'd be shocked and stunned and in hysterics. Barack Obama has just said that you can eat Tide Pods. Like, are you kidding? The president said that? He's like, oh yeah, Trump's on his bullshit.
That sounded like Barack. I know, right? And like
America.
ooh, I like it. When do you age out? You know, like when you have toddlers around, you have to lock up your cleaning supplies and like put like sour face stickers on them. So toddlers being like, I don't want to be the sour face. I don't want to touch this. What age do you age out of that? Like 9, 8?
Yeah, I think the problem is that until you're like 10, 11 maybe 11 is probably pretty good.
Yeah.
But you couldn't really tell the difference between like cleaning fluid and hypnotique and I don't know, like juicy juice.
It's so confusing because medicine tastes like cherries, right? Oh, I have a cough, take some candy. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. How come I can't have this every day? It's like, well, only when you're sick. It's like,
if you're a little imp, you associate colors with artificial flavors.
Yeah.
And deliciousness.
Pepto-Bismol. And yeah, I mean, when I was little of that age, I figured out that I really enjoyed, and this is weird, I enjoyed mixing minty toothpaste into water and chugging it.
It's vile.
It was interesting
it was
to
an
me.
early insight into your love of ingesting things over the sink.
Over the bathroom sink. Yeah.
Doesn't matter. From day one, you've been a sink gorger.
And I remember one time I would like pretended I was in a bar because I had watched like a TV show. And I was like, why, yes, I would like a minty drink. And my father walks in and he's like, who are you talking to? And I'm like, the bartender. It was a really confusing moment for both of us.
I would have just been more upset that you were dining over the sink.
It's now it's on Twitter, most influential pod. People have been talking about what they're eating over the sink.
I know, I saw that. And what you have wrought is foul. It is a trend most foul.
It is not even Corona related. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm going to eat this sandwich. Why sully a plate? I'm just going to eat this sandwich over the sink.
Oh, I know what you're capable of. I like that. I like that everyone else is attributing it to Corona, and you're like,
no, this is a normal life thing, man. This is
my
my
culture
life.
is not a costume.
It is not. Yeah, dude, I'll make like something in a pot and be like, why put the pot stuff on a plate? I'll just eat it from the pot over the sink and wash it out, and then I'm out the door.
I'm just imagining you like posting a photo, devouring like like a turkey hero over the sink, and people are like, Andrew, are you all right? Like, Corona's really doing a doozy on you. Like, no, that's a Throwback Thursday. That's from like 2 years ago.
I'm wearing an Andre Miller jersey. I mean,
that's from Linsanity. That was the happiest day of my life.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, I don't do it often, but I do it sometimes, depending on what it is. If it's crummy, if it's like already in an appropriate vessel, and that vessel could be my hands, it's fine.
You're a savage.
Whatever.
Absolute savage. So anyway, yeah, apparently you're not supposed to rummage around under the sink for what you're going to eat, though. So that's a real disappointment. And none of that will help you stymie the plague of coronavirus, COVID-19, which is novel.
And, like, he doesn't get participation points. I was trying to, like, as I was watching it, I was like, what is he thinking and what are his supporters thinking? Because there's no way out of this one.
I was being sarcastic, sir.
Yeah, he said that today. He was like, you guys didn't know I was joking? And I was like, that was no joke, sir. He was like, how do we get that UV light inside our bodies? I'm like, ooh, that is a cool science fiction idea, and maybe you should pitch it to Marvel Comics that sell stories for children. But there's no way to get light inside our body.
The real, I think, what's the phrase I'm looking for? The real dynamic here is that he's accustomed to riffing and people just sort of nodding, because most of the things he suggests are meaningless.
Yeah.
They're just dumb ideas. I don't know. We could stop people from Singapore from buying candles. And
just be nice to North Korea and they'll do what you want. And we're like, what?
But you know what I mean? He just says stuff and everyone kind of nods and is like, yeah, sure, whatever, man.
Yeah.
And this is science and a matter of life and death during a pandemic. So when he just kind of riffs, like Upright Citizens Brigade, a little improv, you're like, no. I know you're brainstorming. I know you're just throwing ideas at the wall.
Spitballing. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you get the light and you put it inside the body, right? You can do that. We'll look into it. And people are like, dude, do the stuff about banning Muslims and that's great. That we can just nod and kind of look embarrassed. But the whole like hypodermic needles full of Clorox into your jugular vein, it just hits different.
He was like, I've read Twitter. There's all these kids saying they're injecting things into their eyeballs. Why can't we do that? It's like, yes, inject Linsanity into my eyeballs. He's like, would it work for the coronavirus?
Put these Allen Iverson crossover clips injected into my vein. It's like, well, I can do that.
How come these doctors haven't thought of this? Why am I paying them these big bucks?
Take these Jason Tatum highlights and soak a tampon in it, and okay.
So yeah, a part of me is
along.
like, we should not pay attention. We should not even pay it any mind. These are the ramblings of a crazy man, and we know this. On another hand, I'm like, please give us these jokes. I'm like trying to get into the room, being like, and inject what else? Tell me more. Like, it's the only levity that we have for these stupid press conferences.
Yes, and it would be nice and funny, not productive, but funny if someone said, so it was sarcasm. To be clear, anyone who would make those suggestions would be a maniac, an absolute psychopath, and a fool was the only person who would really suggest that.
I know.
That's a bad question. You're a bad person.
And I feel like when people hold these press room reporters to task, being like, how come no one's challenging him? It's like a misunderstanding of what these journalists do, and the president himself misunderstands this. He thinks he's like winning them over. It's like, you're not even right. And they're like, why are we wrong? Tell us more. And they're recording the whole thing. It's like, he's like, the color blue is the color red, don't you know? And they're like, we don't know. Tell us about it. And he's like, you're so stupid. I'm like, dude, their job is to get you to talk more and more and more. And they convey the information. That's their job,
At a very least, and I'm talking very least, the COVID crisis has allowed us to watch him unraveling and being a the last dunce, if you will, on a scale that he was not being broadcast before. Mm-hmm. He would do rallies. He would come out of a helicopter, say some remarks. Yeah. But he has not been taking questions and has not been doing press conferences until this happened. So we are getting some humor out of this, and hopefully some of this will sink in with, the cretinous voters who are considering Xing that Trump box. They will be like, he is the guy who said to put Clorox in my eyes, and I'm blind now.
Right. I mean, the sad thing is there's going to be at least one person being like, I'm going to try a little water and Windex and see what happens. Like, don't do it. But there was a couple.
I don't know if sad is the word that would leap to mind.
I mean, I believe in the office of the presidencies, and I believe it does have influence that boggles my mind if I think about injecting Clorox into our bodies. But, I think a couple of people died from trying chloroquine, right?
I think so too. Yeah, my word would just be stupid or versus sad. I'm not going to get bummed out because someone did that. That death would be on his hands, of course. But it's more like, I'm not saying like some weird Darwin Awards shit. No. I'm just saying I'm not going to be broken up because someone took that nonsensical advice. But it does suck.
I want to be angry. Yeah.
No, it's worth being angry. It's worth calling him out. I'm also just like, I'm not going to shed tears for someone who listened to Donald Trump talk about putting disinfectant into your lungs.
I mean, if I saw a homie loading up that syringe with Clorox, I'd slap it out of their hands and be like, shit. You're an idiot. I won't be sad about it. I'll be like, oh, this is so sad that you thought this would work. I'm like, you are a fucking moron, dude. Don't do that.
I mean, yeah, look, if it is like some person who has COVID and is desperate and does it because the president advised it and they end up dying, that is sad. I retract my callousness towards it. That's sad. If someone who is desperate to stop suffering and follows this loon's advice. Okay, that's sad. Fine.
I'm surprised, the takes of well, then what's methadone? I'm surprised these takes haven't come out yet, because injecting cleaning solution into your veins is so dumb. There's nothing to attach it to. There is no spin, which is another bar for this guy. There's no way to spin this.
Nah. All right. So moving along from the presidency, some other COVID news was that the results of a New York State, I guess it was like a sample gathering, maybe how you would say it. It was a test, and I believe they went to places like supermarkets around the state, and it's a serological antibodies test, and we're not sure exactly how great these are and what percentage of false positives or negatives are popping up, but it did give us a thumbnail. It's a little like BPM 2.
We need so many of these thumbnails. This is the thing. Yeah.
And the remarkable part, and the big number that stood out, was that according to these tests, 21% of the people in New York who were tested appeared to have had coronavirus already. That's a big number. And it's bigger maybe than we expected, or maybe it isn't. I don't know. I haven't really wrapped my head around it. But yes, 21% of people in New York, out of those who were tested in the area, have had it. What's your response to the release of this information?
At first, when I read that, I thought the same. I was like, well, that's a lot, but not surprising and encouraging, because those 21% would have antibodies, right, in theory. And I immediately watched a scientist talk about it on TV, and she was very discouraged. And she was like, I was hoping that number would be bigger, because it means 4/5 of the population has potential to get it. So she was just like, we have to stick to this thing because, again, we don't know enough, and 20% is encouraging, and getting tests is the right thing, and we need all this information. But 4 out of 5 people don't have it. We need to brace. That's all. And she was like, I wish it was higher. I wish it was 50%.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt too. Is that that's a lot of freaking people who had it.
Yeah.
We're talking a couple million, and it did make my own belief that I probably had it when I had some symptoms at about that time when mid March. Mm-hmm. And so, like, you know what? If 20%, and that number is surely higher amongst people who were like in Times Square, frolicking, being around, playing basketball. People who were social would probably up those numbers if you start having some Venn diagrams.
I assume I had it too.
I'm just saying, I feel like there were nights when we went out and everyone was out and we saw everybody and we were in small areas that I would assume that 80% of the people who were in those rooms ended up getting it.
Yeah, I mean, we were in a crowded birthday party that was a great last memory of our life before this. And I remember more than 2 people saying, like, we're human beings, we need to shake hands and hug each other. And I hugged them goodbye, and I probably got it. I didn't feel well for a couple of days. Who knows,
I mean, I remember walking in, seeing one of the kings of Times Square, and we gave each other a delicate elbow tap, being responsible in the era of COVID. Then, of course, went into a swarm of people and like yelled in each other's faces for the next 5 hours. Oh,
yeah. We were definitely crowded around, like, grab that seat. Oh, it's gone. Like, it was a crowded bar. I'm assuming... So this study is noisy, right? Because the people who were able to take this test, who are in supermarkets, who are out and about, are probably not the demographic that this hurt the most, which is the elderly, the people with pre-existing conditions. They're probably at home or already sick, right? So this information is noisy, and the sad part of it is probably it's a bigger percentage of our population, but to a scientist, just empirically not thinking about the humanity of it, it's like, right, this number is closer to what we thought, so we can handle it from there.
Right. I think you could make arguments however you chose to say whether this was truly emblematic of the New York City population. You could say, well, these are people who are healthy and brave enough to be in a supermarket and to take this test. Mm-hmm. And they're the kind of people who might be more liable to get coronavirus because they're more daring. They have more daring do.
True.
And then you could also say, right, but anyone who has been sick over the last couple weeks is probably not back in the supermarket today.
Right.
So I'm just content to look at that number and say we don't know exactly what it is. Maybe it's a little higher, maybe it's less. But it struck me the same way as you. It's a lot of people, but it doesn't approach herd immunization. Mm-hmm. It's 20%. And right, 4 out of 5 people have not had it. So for us to get the disease to basically the point where most people have it in a mathematical sense would be to have 5 times as many deaths as we've already had.
Yeah.
And that's to say, what, 75,000 deaths in New York? Where we're at 15? We're at 15?
Yeah.
Right, so 75,000?
It's horrible, man. And the optimist in me, it sort of agrees with where you stood this whole time. Like, our behaviors are changing, and it won't. We're learning moving forward, and we're gonna mitigate the peaks of this thing, and we won't see what we saw, and we'll see a little bit moving forward, but we are doing the right thing, and we are behaving differently. So I don't think it's gonna come back in force, but it probably won't ever disappear.
Well, it's what you are referring to. It's like, are we going to go back to what we were doing when we just crowd 150 people into 300 square feet? Not for a while, man.
No.
Not for a while.
No.
Can we go back to, say, having every store open? Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing. And with social distancing, people still wearing masks. Mm-hmm. We'll
washing
see how long
hands,
that lasts. But, behavioral changes, washing your hands, not being in large groups, no sporting events, no movies, no concerts, a very different way of living public transportation
And
going to be a
working.
little bit dicey, but a lot of people are going to keep working from home. I think we'll see like the city open up again, but in a different way.
Yeah, we'll never see the stock market floor ever again. I think that would be just irresponsible. They were talking about getting rid of it anyway. It's the accelerant, right? And everything's done online now with the stock market. And what we might see is all of us chain smoking nicotine products, because it turns out that's a cure for corona too.
I love the French. The nicotine in a baguette, it just makes it go away.
Did you know that
French bring cigarettes.
did you know
Turns out the cure is smoking Gauloise.
Well, it turns out the cure for Asian Americans in the Lower East Side is watching Linsanity highlights. So if you just watch that and inject that into your eyeball veins, you're cured, man. Just do that on repeat. Done.
If New Yorkers would just start wearing Timberlands.
If we all started wearing fitted Yankees hats, just get rid of everything.
What you want to do is you want to find a knitted beanie, except that it has a brim that's also knitted into that. And apparently that just makes corona go away.
Right. Supreme drops, I swear. Cures everything. Just get on that line.
A nice egg cream down at the old sody shop.
Oh,
Corona's gone.
It's a pastrami virus vaccine. It's like, I need to hork down this Katz's Deli to save myself.
Yeah, it looks like gabagool just demolishes the thin protein around the coronavirus spore.
Yeah, I'm on that hot dog treatment, man. That dirty water dog treatment. God, did you try the gabagool? It's like, it worked wonders.
Yeah, I'm breathing great now.
I just tweeted fire Dolan or sell the team. It turns out I feel amazing.
Do whatever you like, and it actually has an incredible effect. It's a placebo type of thing.
That's right.
So one story, before we get off the coronavirus tip, is that the restaurant in the Lower East Side, or East Village, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
You can be the judge of that. It's called Prune. It's really well known. It's a great restaurant. The owner is Gabrielle Hamilton, and she wrote a very long essay in the New York Times about, I guess, just the experience of being a longtime restaurateur and the decisions that one is confronted by in a changing New York that, as we have said many times, sees coronavirus as an accelerant. Mm-hmm. And again, it's worth reading. She's a very good writer, and she talks a lot about her changing clientele, the slim margins of operating a restaurant in New York City, the inability to, pay for, say, to pay for someone to clean something and just doing it herself. There's just these realities that you just have to keep doing, and you're never exactly comfortable. You're never wealthy. You're never set. And that's kind of the gist of it. And then she goes on and talks about the changing audience, and her brunch became very famous, and she brings up influencers and social media, and there's the kind of boomery griping one would expect. But overall, she's really talking about the old New York, the maybe ideal way of dining. She describes people being lost in like a cocoon of wine and slivers of chocolate and not noticing they're the last people in the restaurant. And it's very romantic, and
It's wistful.
there's a lot of whist. There's a lot of whist in there. What was your takeaway, Whist King?
Well, just to give it some more background, she has been the chef of Prune forever. She has published a best-selling cookbook. She is a good writer. She was a feature of a show called Mind of a Chef, where she did a whole season of her restaurant, her recipes, her life, her philosophies. She was in charge of the Spotted Pig for a quick second, but had pushed back against that. She's a good writer, and I'm a medium fan of her restaurant. I really like it. It's a local spot for sure. It's above Houston Street. It has been a staple, and chefs love it. Chefs hang out there. It's a small, really lovely place. She has a flair for like romantic ideas and drama. And when you watch her on TV, you can tell what kind of person she is. She looks for like the whist in everything, and how, and she's rightful to keep food at its most simple and to offer these things. And she describes them in the same way she wrote about her experience with coronavirus. And I thought it was a really great read, and I thought it was really relatable. It also had an air of griping, and about how it was like, I have so many awards, here are my awards. I live life to its most ethical end, yet can you believe I am not rich? And I'm like, yes, I can, because this system is busted. And she goes to talk about how the system's busted in detail, in very frank detail. And it does ring a little bit of the way we see a lot of East Village artists get older and talk about the old New York, and how the New York has kind of left them behind, which it has, and how they may have not gotten their dues. I was joking on Twitter a few weeks ago. It's like, the universe did not compensate some of my hardest working friends. And I think if we learned anything from coronavirus, is that the standalone value of hard work is low, which is sad.
Yeah, there is definitely an undertone of, I'm respected, my restaurant is a thing, I've been doing this for so long, and how am I threatened after a month and change of potentially not reopening or being in dire straits? Like, how is that reasonable? That there is a tone of that. I would agree. Mm-hmm. Where, as you said, she's a culinary world celebrity. Her restaurant is both regarded as excellent and very popular, but she has to worry about not being able to get loans. She has to worry about, how can she pay people? How can she foot her bills? How can she reopen? And I think that's part of it. And the other side is what you said, the typical gripes of people who have been around in New York for 20 years, and just that the city has changed. Yeah. And, she mentions like the $56, like what is it, like branzino or whatever it is at Via Corona. And you can tell there's a little, it's a little dart.
Yeah.
Where she doesn't want to sell a $60 fish on her menu.
Yeah. I mean, every part of this really great article or essay puts her in the place of the most virtue, right? Like, and then I was on the ground trying to like scrape clean the back of my stove. I'm like, that's virtuous. And then I had to take less money and pay my employees. I'm like, that's virtuous. And it seemed, hey man, it's her perspective. I thought it was an A+ essay, but it didn't remind me of sports because it didn't have a reaction. There was no opponent. The opponent seemed to be the universe, and it's really hard to figure out what characteristics the universe has.
Was her scrubbing for eggshells beneath the stove, was that Giannis taking 5 threes a game?
Yeah, it's Taj
Performative
Gibson.
hard work.
Yeah, it's Amorai throwing a punch in defense of the garden idea, the garden ideals. No, and I don't mean to poke fun, because like I'm gonna move out of this neighborhood pretty soon too. And what she said about like how artistic communities or entrepreneurs gather, the Lower East Village was affordable 20 years ago when she moved in, and it was kind of dangerous but exciting in a way. Now it's just like not affordable. It is midtown prices. It is not for people who want to take a chance anymore. It's for people who are successful already. And you see a lot of old stalwarts here, like her restaurant, Max Fish. Barricat's gone. Katz's Deli is different. Like, they're survivors, but the holding on to it is increasingly a more difficult proposition.
Shout out to Punjabi, though.
Yo, shout out to Punjabi. And she shouts out Punjabi. Yo, that's where I started to get kind of emo about it. I'm like, oh, she just shouted out like this place that I always thought would be there forever, and now I haven't thought about it, but now I'm coming to terms that it might not be.
I thought that the best phrase she used is the one that I said earlier, the cocoon of wine and conversation. And that's the only point where I've had some like whist. Because I don't like whist. Not one bit. Not a whit. Not a whit of wisp.
I'll cover it for both of us.
I was like, oh man, I do miss that. You know, that feeling of contentment and camaraderie, whether you're with like a romantic partner or your friends or a group of people that you just met and are meeting, whatever it is, that late night post-prandial last glass of wine, desserts kind of rummaging around the table. I'm like, oh man, you can't get that shit at home.
No, yeah, I agree.
I was almost wistful.
Yeah, and I feel like 2 out of every 5 New Yorker magazine covers talk about this New York whisk that she was describing, and whether that be like leaves changing colors or like a private little scene in a small place like Prune late at night. I'm like, oh yeah, this is what New York has, because we don't have beautiful scenery, we don't have space, but we have these little kind of private interactions or these moments, and she describes them very well, and Prune is all about that. I think her place definitely optimizes that experience. But
and from her perspective, I think one could argue that she has created her own little fiefdom and her own little perfect world and was rewarded for that and was able to keep that intact, and now the outside world in various ways has intruded upon it, whether it's you know, the basic girl calling about brunch that she brings up many times that seems to just really like get her goat, to Instagrammers taking photos of pancakes, to now the price point making it unaffordable, and also coronavirus.
Yeah.
So that was the theme also, that she created her own little ecosystem in her own reflection, and it was wonderful, and it served the purposes for the neighborhood that she wanted it to serve. And now there has been transgressions. It does not serve the same purposes, it does not serve the same people, and now it is jeopardized by people that she doesn't even want to deal with in the first place.
And this is Nixian, and I love the Knicks, and I love Prune. And when she talks about, like, we still take reservations with a pencil and paper, I'm like, why do you do that? Why didn't you hire a stat guy? Why didn't you get, like, a computer system? Like,
we still use our guts to take reservations.
Right. And that is very virtuous. But in sports, it's a clear discussion. But when you're running, like, a beautiful restaurant, it's like, oh, it's so charming. They still go by their feelings, and they don't want to bend to like modern new ideas of like caviar or takeout or seamless, and I don't think they should. And she is like the peak of successful, and she should be able to operate this way. But I don't know, man. It's like I found myself as just like a sports fan reading this and being like, I love it. I love the romanticism of it, and I'm absolutely sympathetic, and we need to save people like her from going out of business. But at the same time, I'm like, can someone go in there and get her a POS system or like some sort of more efficient way to like take reservations to keep her alive? You know. Like,
so the Four Top at 8:00, did they just want it more?
Right. Yeah.
Like
exactly.
how did you keep that? Oh, someone jotted it down after a phone call. No, look, obviously that system can work, and it's totally fine if she wants to operate like that. But to your point, there is a bit of virtue signaling, if you will, by saying we still use a landline and we still use a pen and paper. Because, like, cool, man. Yeah. Like, cool. That works. Yeah, I know. People have been doing that forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a system that has proven for, since the beginning of the telephone, that effectively works for restaurants.
We have enough assets for a superstar. You just wait. I'm like, yes, that works. You know? And it was a great essay, and I had a lot of my friends text me being like, holy shit, this really got me, man. And I'm like, yeah, it's wonderfully written, and it's true. All of it is true. And the skeptic in me is just what I'm trying to describe. I think it's time for all of us, myself included, obviously, to like we have to adapt to new things, and I have no idea what that is coming up, what that means, but it's clear that like I cannot just stick to like I'm gonna make paintings in my studio and someone will recognize that they're good. I'm like, oh no, the whole behavior has to change.
Yeah, and also she's operating in a bit the same manner as the Knicks or Lakers because she has the luxury of having a place that people want to go and eat all the time.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. And I'm not saying that people want to go play for the Knicks all the time, but they operate under that idea.
Yeah.
No, we're in New York City. People want to come and play here. It's the biggest market. Sneaker companies will pay them more. They can be a superstar. We've got that here. We don't need to upgrade because we're New York City. And maybe we've seen, talking about the Knicks specifically, them changing that, where they went and hired an accomplished capologist and a super agent from outside of the organization. Maybe that is a bit of recognition that we need to modify our approach, and we can't just say, yeah, we're drafting with a pen and paper.
Exactly. And I want somebody to read that essay that she wrote and be like, hey, you don't have to change that much, but I think I have an idea how you can reopen and adapt, like you have a chance. And I hope that's happening. And she writes in the article, and this is, hang with me here, I think this is like kind of, I'm workshopping this in my brain, but if there's any silver lining to this awful thing, like really seismically terrible thing, is that I think at some point in everyone's life you have to like reevaluate what you're doing, right? Like what have I been doing? Have I been doing it wrong? Am I happy? And I think that happens later on in life. So that's why when we talked about Kobe in that episode, it's like he wasn't done yet. The story wasn't complete. He was on his way, and you could see where he was going, but it takes time. And if this thing is an accelerant, we're forced to deal with things that I think we would be forced to deal with when we really confront mortality, right? And or when we get sick. And Gabrielle Hamilton talking about this, in a way, if there's a silver lining, I'm like, she's doing a huge human thing right now that we're all going to have to do, and she's still pretty young.
Yeah, and as much as we talk about this being an accelerant in many ways, and I do believe that, there are certainly some areas in which it could be a correction by necessity or just by virtue of how things have unfurled. Mm-hmm. Maybe rents in Manhattan and New York in general for residential properties and commercial properties will tumble. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say they'll stay down there forever, but the way we've seen them propped up over the last few years, in part because of Airbnb and then Manhattan just being aggressively expensive, maybe all of a sudden people will be able to say, rent a vacant place in New York, in Manhattan, and open something interesting. Mm-hmm. Maybe, a company that doesn't have a shit ton of like venture capital behind it will be able to open up an office space. Mm. Overall, maybe there are some corrections. And, with a restaurant, maybe this does lend itself to streamlining, to efficiency, to updating in ways that allow a place like this to survive going forward instead of dying a slow death.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I hope so too. And that's
just a silver lining here. Maybe there's a few ways in which there's like an upside here.
That's on the table, and I agree with you 1,000%. And there's a chance of that, which is great. And what I thought about reading this essay was she seemed like she was confronting the idea that she won't have this thing that she created, this artwork, her restaurant. And what is she to do? She makes restaurants, she makes food, she creates this place for us to be in. And I'm like, oh shit, you're a writer, you're a memoirist, And I think she is in a rare situation because she's not just a creative person with an idea who wants to open something up. She's uniquely talented. And I think a lot depends on like a handful of people in our society that are really fucking good at what they do. And it's clear that she's going to publish a book in 2 years about this, and it's going to be almost as influential as her restaurant.
And also, to be frank about her, if this restaurant, Prune specifically, didn't work, she has such status and such respect. It'd be very easy for her to get investors together to open up another one.
She has that. She's one of the few people that absolutely can do that.
Her dream overall is not jeopardized by coronavirus. And I don't even think Prune is. Oh, really?
I agree. There's ways to reopen that thing.
Yeah, and again, this is not to diminish any of the things she said in that article, but she is really, really accomplished. She's not the person who started Cherry Hill on, Manhattan Avenue in Greenpoint that is like, wait a minute.
Yes.
We've been open for a year. We got good reviews. It's not that crowded. What are we doing here?
Yeah, she's John Legend playing piano next to all of his awards. And it's just like, hang in there, guys. I'm like, thank you, John Legend, award-winning songwriter. But like, I absolutely am rooting for Gabrielle Hamilton, and I'm also, like, to your point, I'm rooting for the people that weren't crushing it before this and didn't have a voice like she does, and who are probably the first to go, and no one will ever think about them.
That's true. Moving on. Andrew, first of all, have you recovered from last night's Travis Scott Fortnight concert?
Woo, it was crazy. I had to inject that concert into my veins, man. And I'm cured of all negative thoughts because I experienced that. How about you?
Oh, man. Travis did it. I was just there on Fortnight. He appeared in his towering visage and started dropping the jams. And it made my corona go away.
Yeah. I mean, I love this idea. I think we were talking about this during the D-Nice thing. And why did I say D-Nice like Trump? I was like, that DJ, D-Nice. D-Nice, the party extravaganza, the Ellen Zuck jam. I thought it was going to be like this. I thought everyone had avatars going to hang out in front of Staples and like celebrate, and dance. You
thought it was Second Life.
I thought I had fallen behind and everyone had a Second Life character like already built and just logged on and were dancing. Little did I know it was just a chat room. But
when you saw the Travis Scott avatar, so the way they did it from the clip that I saw was it looked like the typical Fortnite landscape, and I've never played Fortnite as I'm not a gamer, but it was the typical landscape and the characters could move and jump and run as normal, and there was a massive like Paul Bunyan-esque Travis Scott performing his songs, and the background behind him would change and he would disappear and reappear, and it was all kind of timed to the music and things he said, and with explosions. And honestly, it looked kind of cool. It's not how I would want to experience a concert exactly, but it was cool in a vague sense, and it was creative, but it still looked like Second Life.
Yeah. It's thrilling, though, right? Like, if you already inhabit that world of Fortnite, which millions of people do, and you're like, yo, there's going to be a Travis Scott party here tomorrow night. Being like, this is incredible. Is he going to play new songs? Are we going to see new gear? And I think, like, I was actually disappointed that you can actually buy merch in real life for that concert. I'm like, oh, you should just sell merch in the Second Life and have people make it a skin for their avatar, it should never be available. It should never touch physical worlds. But I thought it was cool. I want more of it. I mean, are we mad that hologram Tupac existed? No.
There are things to not be irritated about, and this is one of them. People want to see Travis Scott in a video game. Like,
Yeah, let's do it.
go off, Kings.
Yeah, no problems. And I mean, I've been tempted to get into the Second Life stuff, but if you were Fortnite and you like basketball, and it's like, yo, the Knicks are gonna play the Celtics tomorrow night, and I'm like, cool, can I get courtside? Like, you can all get courtside. That's awesome.
So this is vaguely on topic with this idea, and we're going to talk about basketball now. Sorry. So the NFL draft occurred yesterday, and it was, I would say, the first, large-scale, meaningful sporting event. And I'm using event as more of a, not sports itself, but an event, like a happening, a meaningful happening.
I hear you.
That has occurred since the corona outbreak shut down the NBA. So everything has been learned on the fly, and the NBA has pretty much shit the bed twice with their video game tournament and then their horse tournament. They've tried to find ways to engage their bored audience, and it hasn't worked.
And
it's clear that people want to watch things because The Last Dance did spectacularly in terms of ratings, but the NBA's on-the-fly, spur-of-the-moment, remote events have flopped. Was there anything you took away from the NFL draft that could be a lesson for the NBA?
Absolutely, and I'm busting out of the sin bin because I watched the whole thing joyously. I think the NFL had an advantage over the NBA now because the NBA is kind of still in the middle of their season, so they can't really have eventful things because it would just have to be the playoffs. But the NFL, I'll just describe it quickly for you. They had a camera on the commissioner who was hosting. They had a camera for each coach in their house, each GM, and a bunch of fans. And for each prospective player. So, there were players that knew they were probably going to go in the first round, so there was cameras there. And they had all the hats of every team, and when they got picked, they put on the hat with their family. And it was done very well. None of the hiccups I thought would happen happened.
When you saw a player get drafted, when you say cameras were there, were they just using like an iPhone?
No, it was set up in the corner, so stationary. It was really cool. You could see the NFL really went all out, Not as much as it would cost to have it in Las Vegas with like attendance, but they really tried hard. The thing I realized that would change probably really fast is like the quality of the picture was just terrible. Like, can we get Spectrum to just go in there and make it crisp? Because as soon as you have that production quality, we're rolling. I don't see...
Well, that's why I was speculating that it was still using iPhones on tripods and stuff like that.
Could be.
I just don't think they would have delivered like a high quality camera to everyone who was potentially drafted in the first couple of rounds. I could be wrong. I have no idea.
I don't know the cheapest way to do this. It could have been a GoPro. What are they, like $300 or something? I don't know.
That's true. I just feel like they're probably like, here's a tripod.
Yeah. Well,
put someone's thing on, landscape mode and put it in the corner.
Yeah, I mean, the cheapest iPhone probably could have gotten it done, but it has to be live, so that's the trickiness. So it can't be GoPro. Right. But it was done well, and there was hiccups, and there was moving around, and it was awkward, but you settled in really quickly. After the first overall pick, we were rolling, and the joy that I think the internet had with it was we got a window into everybody's houses. So it turned into us joking about where they were. There was like these beautiful settings with like backyards that were football fields, like Parasite. And then there were just like attics. And Mike Vrabel had his kids in costume in back of him, like dancing. It was so awesome, and you could see the potential of this. And me and you have always talked about the draft should be this, right? Free agency for a week and performances, being like, we're going live. Who am I going to sign with? And people dancing, It's going to evolve so fast that I think there's real potential here. And I thought they did a great job on night one. There's going to be 3 nights. It was wonderful to see, and I think the NBA is going to make it even better.
This makes me confident that we'll soon see some collaborative effort from people, and they'll put out like a movie that was shot on like various iPhones or cameras and then edited together I'm sure it's happening right now. Because if I was in Hollywood and bored as shit and had friends who are actors and directors and editors, I would have done that immediately. Mm-hmm. All right, let's write a script and figure out some drama we can do where it's like we're trapped in places and can only communicate in this way, and then just like put it out. Or whatever the plot would be. But yeah.
Somehow Steven Dorff would be in it. I don't know why.
But, or if you were, involved in the acting trade, and so was your partner, just quickly putting together a marriage story type of movie, like two people in a room. But to your point, so the NBA does not have to have a draft in a while, and you made a good point that the only thing the NBA can really give us right now that we care about is games, and they can't give us that.
Right.
And you'd suggested they should just go ahead and do the draft anyway, but that doesn't really make sense because
the lottery,
because that doesn't even happen until. Actually, it would have happened about now, right?
About now, like in a month or something, the conference finals time. I mean. That's just assume that they cancel the regular season, which they have not done yet. But I think they should. It hurts me as a Knicks fan, but they should cancel it. I think it's safer for everybody. Are you looking up when the draft
it was mid-May. You're right.
Yeah, and that they could do it. I think they should just do it, and I don't think it would have the gravity of a draft. But the lottery is also pretty fun, and then we can run with it. We can have more mock drafts, and the KBB could be birthed. Whatever. KBB's already birthed. Get that right. Me.
So, yeah, the NBA is kind of handcuffed. It can't give us games. There's no reason to give us the lottery for a while, unless they announce that the season's canceled, which they don't want to do. Yeah. So they can't really do anything. But I'm with you on the idea that the entertainment here is not seeing what happens. It's seeing the environment. It's seeing what someone's home looks like. We talked more about Mike Conley's home gym or Paul Pierce's stupid, miscolored Celtics outdoor court than we cared about what the event itself. And I think that's the kind of unblemished, unvarnished look that is eye-opening. Yeah. How do these people live? Yeah. Who has a tacky house?
Yeah.
Who seems to have a lot more money than you'd expect? Who's living like a bum?
Counting people's money is an American tradition, and we get to do that actively. And this is fleeting, right? Because as soon as, if they have to do this again, and I hope they don't, but if we're doing this, they're going to have more advanced sets where it's like, I don't want people to make fun of my attic anymore.
For sure. The next time they'll just be like a Denver Broncos, step and repeat behind them or something.
For sure. So this was a unique thing, and it's so funny how I think people learn, because I think we can all imagine how this would have gone down. And 10 minutes into it, we were flying. We were going, like, people were having draft parties, like analysts. So I'd switch to see what Mina Kimes was saying about what the Jets did back into ESPN to my Twitter feed to see what the reactions were. And it was quickly something that I thought worked and I thought was easy to learn.
One thing that's become apparent is that while we do appreciate better quality video, better sound quality, etc., we've also really become accustomed to shitty sound quality and shitty video in the way that we talk with each other. If you get on FaceTime with a family member or a friend or whoever, you're pretty accustomed to it, like glitching and going, all Virtua Fighter for a little while and it losing video. And we don't expect that from, billion-dollar companies, but we also watch a lot of media like that. We watch videos where the camera is the wrong way and there's people yelling, in various places. And it's the democratization of media is almost working in reverse, where we're seeing the most expensive, the most wealthy, the most privileged people in the same way as our friends. It's almost like deeply humanizing.
I totally agree, man. To see these guys, even the NFL, Roger Goodell, like deal with the same like web like bandwidth issues that we have to deal with, I'm like, oh, I always think like when I have a Coca-Cola or like an Oreo cookie, I'm like the richest person on earth doesn't have a better version of this. It's just an Oreo or a can of Coke, and everyone craves that thing. You know, it's like money can't buy you a better Crystal Pepsi. It just is what it is. And when we see this go down, I'm like, oh, even the juggernaut of the NFL has to deal with stuff like YouTubers have to deal with.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's always been viewed as going the other direction, that the video quality and capabilities of the layperson would get closer and closer and closer to that of the professional. And now we're seeing it go the exact opposite way.
Yeah. And we kind of saw that in streetwear and fashion, right? How the means of production kind of caught up to everyone. It was accessible and affordable to everyone, where if you, like my friend has an 11-year-old kid who loves Supreme, and he's like, I want to make my own t-shirts. I'm like, oh, I can help you. You know, like that can be done, kid, you know? And I think that's a really, like if you put these YouTubers in charge of the next NBA draft, they would crush it because they've had figured all this out, right?
Right. And it's the same way that we looked at the Blair Witch Project, and it felt identifiable and real and authentic because they took a video camera or a video camera style production and turned it into a real movie. And it's the same thing we're sort of seeing here, is that we are totally fine with garbage content. We ingest garbage content all day.
Yeah. I mean, shout out, and we've said this before, shout out to the Bunham Murray company who created The Real World. That influence is just, I mean, they were influential, but they also got very lucky, and it takes both. But holy cow, we're in 2020 watching an NFL draft, and it makes me think of season 1 in the puck building of The Real World and how they set this language for us.
Shout out to Bike Messenger Puck.
Yeah. Who was he in the Boston? Was he season 2?
I think he's San Francisco, season 2 maybe?
Oh, season 3 maybe?
I don't know, one of those early ones. Definitely 1, 2, or 3. Not 1. Definitely 2 or 3.
The star from season 1 was Heather B. and Eric Nice, right? From New York City.
Yeah, you know Eric Nice's dad was an NBA official.
What?
A ref.
What? Was he like during the Jordan era?
It was that era.
That would make sense. Wow. Did he cook the books like your boy Donaghy?
His father was an NBA ref. I'm trying to look it up right now.
I vaguely remember this as a tidbit.
His father, Jack, is one of the longest running referees in NBA history.
When did he retire? Did he retire?
I don't even know. Anyway, his father is Jack Nice, NBA ref. And that's why this is a basketball podcast. 'Cause insight like that.
Man, but like we're watching the real world stuff, right? And I turned on the NFL draft and it looked totally acceptable to me. Of course, I thought like, can't they make this better? But I was like, I'm kind of cool with this, man.
In the same way, Draymond Green has been up on Paul Rivera's
All Your Socials
Clutch podcast, and they're doing it the same way. Instagram Live, a camera, whatever. It's just them. You know, Paul looks like he's got a beard. Shout out to PR. And Draymond's there, whether it's at home and whatnot, and they're just chatting. But Draymond's back in the news going after Barkley again and out-boomering the boomer, using that rings talk. I have mixed feelings about this because I really like Draymond and I really like Charles Barkley, and I feel like they should not be enemies. They should be friends.
They will be.
And I don't think they're really enemies. I think they're both guys who are underappreciated for various reasons. But I do really relish Chuck getting roasted by like boomer metrics.
Is the roaster of your roaster your friend?
I don't know.
I especially like it because the conversation itself is painfully boring, but the thing that it is awesome. And to me, it's sort of like the Gabrielle Hamilton thing. She's not only an amazing chef and restaurateur and personality, she's an amazing writer. And Draymond Green is not only one of the best defenders we've ever seen and a great basketball player who I think will go into the Hall of Fame, but it turns out he's a great media guy, and I'd gladly have him next to Kendrick Perkins or somebody being like, nah, I don't think so. It's great to see him kind of change and show us what he's good at as well, because I could watch a lot of Draymond, man.
It's weird when you try to figure out what role being thoughtful and cerebral and funny have on your ability to play basketball. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that they do have an ability, but when you see guys like Draymond and LeBron who are witty and creative and smart, and you just kind of realize that there's a cerebral approach to the game that maybe is a bit reflective of how sharp they are.
That is like the most simple thing that I haven't really thought about a lot ever. Yeah, you're right. It's like Draymond Green is such a thoughtful guy on the court, and you can see it in the way he plays. And after interviews, definitely, even though he provides us with amazing memes, like him turning into a scarecrow version of himself, he's deep in thought. But yeah, I mean, the gravity and storytelling that he provides when he talks shit about Charles Barkley is kind of the same kind of clever he uses on the court.
Yeah, and I haven't thought this through at all because I am not that thoughtful person.
Neither am I, man.
Unlike Draymond Green or LeBron.
Yeah, no, those guys are geniuses.
But that idea that having mental acuity and that sort of deftness and ability to adapt on the fly wouldn't correspond to basketball also seems strange, because basketball is like, it's a mix of physical attributes, of course, but you're thinking at everything, every step of the game, every single part of it is about thinking.
Yeah.
So if you were an outlier in terms of being smart as shit, it does follow that it would be a benefit.
Yeah. And it's like a different intelligence, because a lot of these players who are smart on the court end up in coaching positions, and they become thinkers in our game, or front office thinkers. But the dexterity of being a television or media personality is a different kind of intelligence, right? And it's really nice to see who can do that. Yo, shout out to Kendrick Perkins. He can kind of roll, even though I don't agree with his boomer cosplay, as you say, which is totally correct. He's kind of good at this, and he has an interest in it. And I think a lot of players don't. Like Larry Bird has never done much media. Magic Johnson loves it. Obviously, Michael Jordan doesn't like it. LeBron James loves it on his own terms, like with his show on HBO. But I really thirst for this stuff, and I love it when these players, as they're in their prime, are like engaging in a way that Charles Barkley is past his prime.
We definitely need new voices. We've griped about this in the past, that unless you're a Boston player or a neo-boomer, it feels as if there are limited places for you to find a toehold.
It's true.
And I get that they want former players. There are people who understand the game. They can interact with each other. They can interact with current players in a way that maybe, Joe Blow can't. They share commonalities and an understanding of the game from playing at a high level that would elude someone who is just a fan of the game or a coach of the game, etc. I'm not saying that's valid. There's an argument for that. But man, I just want to see some interesting opinions, and like, respect to Kendrick Perkins, who is an entertaining guy. Mm-hmm. But like, why is every flamethrower like hot take artist, why are they always neo-traditionalists? Every time. No one comes with like heat rock, like the Cookies Hoops interns, that is forward thinking, that talks about today's guys being awesome and the guys from the past being absolute bums. Where's that guy?
And even people like Steven Jackson, who I enjoy a ton when he shows up on TV, he kind of reverts back to boomerism as well. And it's crazy to think that how hard it is to be an NBA player is like 0.00001% of the population, even smaller than that, How hard is it to, after being an NBA player, being a personality on ESPN or Fox or wherever? Like, that's even smaller. Like, there's one person on 3 teams that ends up doing that.
Well, that's the problem here, right? Is that if you're an NBA player, you are among the top 300 basketball players on the planet. That's just such a tiny slice of all the people who play ball. You're not just elite. You're on the other side of the mountain.
Yeah, it's
just an outrageous sliver of the people who play basketball, an almost unfathomable rarity. Those people aren't necessarily the same people who'd be good at announcing.
No, not at all.
There's no intermingling between those skill sets by default. So to say we're going to make up most of our announcers from former players, it's like, well, what if? How do you become a basketball announcer if you're not a basketball player? Then you're already taking this tiny population and saying we're going to get a lot of our talent from this pool. Yeah. And as much as I like to see former players be able to have careers after basketball, it also seems kind of crazy to say, oh, these guys who made zillions of bucks playing hoops, they're also the pool that we're going to go and find our announcers from. You're like, come on, give someone else a shot.
I agree. And like, there's people I love, like Amin Al-Hassan, who was on ESPN, who worked in the Phoenix Suns front office, and Lebitard I love, and all these personalities who didn't play in the NBA. I don't think it's easy because it's a fraternity. Like my wife is watching that Japanese reality show, Essex House, something house. I'm blanking, but there's a Japanese player on it in the Japanese league, and Rui Hachimura makes an appearance, and she's like, the Japanese guy wants to play in the NBA. Is there a chance? I'm like, there is no chance. He should have gone to baseball because there's a pipeline to Major League Baseball from Japan. But if you're Japanese, like, you kind of don't get there, not because you're not good at what you do. It's because this is a culture and a fraternity, and there's ways to get there. And Ryu Hachimura played college ball in the States and then got drafted. And the same goes with, I think, these talking heads and these thinkers in the NBA. You don't get Elton Brand's position if you're smarter than Elton Brand. You have to be Elton Brand.
I just want to see a diversity of opinions to spice things up. I'm just sick of players being used as, cudgels to beat up on modern players. I think that's some weird, almost like a betrayal. And to me, it's lame.
When Bill Simmons was great on ESPN.
I mean, let Jacoby go on the NBA show. Come on.
That would be fun. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, they're out there. They're on the payroll. Like, I want to see Pablo Torre in a prime analyst position.
Exactly, because it's the jock back and forth to me is just kind of boring. I would much rather see a jock and someone who's coming from a different point of view sparring over some of these ideas. I think that would be better TV, but that's not like my forte, so I could be totally wrong.
Well, not for nothing. Like, I think in the NFL coverage, there is a bigger diversity. There's like nerds there. There's money people. They incorporate a lot of different voices. Obviously, you have the old players like Teddy Bruschi and all that stuff talking about wanting it more, and you have to have that as an element of your message. But I was finding myself last night like rummaging for nerd takes. Like there's a lot of
you
people
and
on
your
Twitter.
nerdcore hip hop, shamed by Trebek.
Big Trebek energy over here. But I agree. I think if we can accelerate to a point where we can have more people talking about hoops, man.
I'm not even saying they should be out there being like, well, the offensive rating of this person and his
No.
you know, I get it. This is for entertainment. I just want to see someone who's willing to challenge those old thoughts. And I think the biggest problem with that is the trump card of you never played the game is really hard to overcome. And I think that affects the hiring. It affects promotion. I think along the whole sort of pundit class, that's the trump card. You never played the game, man.
Yeah.
You don't know what it's like in that locker room. You've never taken the final shot on the highest level. You've never been out there with a crowd chanting your name.
Yeah.
You weren't there. So your opinion just doesn't matter. You can sit here and tell me about how this player has, a better true shooting percentage and has actually, knocked down this amount of shots in this situation and how he can't really hit mid-range jumpers. Doesn't matter, man. You weren't out there.
Yeah.
You never felt the sweat of Allen Iverson drip on your cheek as he crossed you into submission.
And that's why I find this Draymond versus Barkley thing so delicious, because he out-boomered the boomer, right? Because Barkley's like, spend a day in my shoes, and Draymond's like, I'm you, but more successful. And I'm like, he has a point. He's not wrong.
Well, Barkley has fallen into the boomer trap.
Yeah.
The old boomer tar pit, where he talks about winning despite the fact that he hasn't really won, and wanting it more despite the fact that he was lazy.
Right.
So he's barking up the wrong tree, because in reality, Barkley was a fantastic player that metrics absolutely love and put as like a top 3 to 5 player in the history of the NBA.
Super good.
But he's still trapped in his boomer wheelhouse where Draymond can like windmill on him by saying you've never won anything.
I mean, Draymond just wins this hands down, and it's sort of like when people try to bring out Jordan's rings against LeBron. I'm like, do we have to talk about the BMM? Like, all those guys are like 8 for 9 in seasons, like 8 championships in 9 seasons.
I mean, I've noticed you doing it, and I like it. When people bring up Jordan, like, yeah, but Havlicek.
Yeah, there's 2 Joneses you should look up. Sketch, I forgot all their names because they all won.
Casey Jones.
Casey Jones, and obviously the Russ.
Yeah, what about Robert Horry? Can't forget about him.
Yeah. And, people would respond with Robert Horry being like, well, he wasn't a foundational part of those teams. And Robert Horry is awesome about it. He was like, yo, you guys, man, I got lucky. I hit those shots, but I wouldn't be able to hit them again. He's really cool about it. And but the BMM is coming after you, Jordan guys. And LeBron is just like, LeBron gets more and more untouchable to me as we talk more about Jordan. It just like reaffirms that LeBron is just apex.
How is that? I mean, I agree with you that
Yeah.
LeBron is at the top of the heap, but how are you being? How are you being more convinced of LeBron's greatness as the Jordan propaganda film, 10 hours of which are currently unscrolling?
Because we already argued ad nauseum about how many championships, 6 for 6. LeBron has lost a bunch of finals and Jordan would never. That to me has been litigated, and I don't want to go back. But now that people are arguing more, they're bringing out deeper and deeper stats like clutch stats and late game stats. And LeBron just is dominant if you compare him in a vacuum just to Jordan. And the more numbers we dig up, the more confirmation there is that, like, not only can you talk about LeBron in those terms, we haven't even gotten to his versatility that we've discussed forever. Like, oh, you could just put him on the 5. If your 5 is going off, LeBron's on you. If your 1 is going off, LeBron's on you. Jordan really didn't have to do that.
When we think about the impact of those guys, Jordan's ancestors, obviously Kobe, DeRozan,
Alonzo Trier.
Josh Smith. Corey Brewer.
The God.
But no, but really, the guys like DeRozan and Kobe, that sort of that two guard swing man who gives you buckets, plays D on both sides. Kawhi, Paul George. Those guys certainly exist. They're a big part of the league. You could say Tatum is part of that lineage, that style of player. ISO scorer and can play some D. And I'm not convinced those players are that conducive to winning. And I know it's a weird thing to hear after we saw Kawhi put together an incredible performance. But that said, for example, like if the Sixers had Mike Muscala, they win that series in 6 games. And I know this is all like blah, 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 blah. But I just don't love that prototype of player. I just don't love it. I really, really am so much more into the LeBron archetype of scorer distributor than I am as the ISO scorer wing defender. The guy who can guard a zillion different positions, who can distribute the ball, who can also score, 30 points if you need him to. I just think they're a different caliber of impactfulness. I just don't care about the Jordan archetype anymore. It's weird. I growing up, we all loved it. And those are the players that Jordan, and like culturally, he was so important. I just don't give a shit about good two-way wings. I find them valuable players. They're excellent. It's great to have them. I just don't care about them.
And I agree. And even more to that, I'm exhausted of Mamba mentality. I find some joylessness in it when I see a player on the court just like starting shit with somebody. Basically, entire Knicks ethos, It's just like, yo, I don't appreciate the way you looked at me. I really love Lance Stevenson blowing air into Jordan's ear and Jordan just laughing. Like, I'm into this, right? I'm into comedy.
Oh, you mean LeBron's ear? Yeah.
Oh yeah, my bad. LeBron's ear. I'm into that. I'm into J.R. Smith untying somebody's shoes. And the whole Mamba mentality thing is just extremely, extremely exhausting to me.
Because it's a bit NFL, right?
Yeah.
They're in the trenches. This is war.
Yeah.
They're playing basketball.
Yeah.
And you can be cheerful and play really hard. You can be intense.
Yeah. Oh, but LeBron's intense.
Without being a cartoon.
Yeah.
This is not war.
Yeah, right.
It's a sport.
Yeah.
And you can play hard and physical and be really locked in. But I feel like so much of that other stuff is just performative.
Yeah, and I think Jordan tried to misdirect us by saying like, oh, you're not going to like my personality after this documentary. I'm like, oh, he's trying to hide the fact that we're going to revisit the numbers and he's not going to be as good anymore. But I'll take his challenge. Yeah, I don't like his personality. I like him less now,
But I think him and Kobe also used this persona of outworking and wanting it more than other people to avoid being discounted because of their athleticism and their just ability to be gnarly at basketball.
Right. Absolutely.
You see the stuff that Jordan was able to do. He was the first man to dunk. People couldn't stay in front of him.
Yeah.
He would float in the air as they landed, and then he'd dunk on their heads. Like Kobe was 17 years old doing like 360s. And
insane.
It's almost the same way Giannis is ashamed of what makes him good.
Right.
That they want to be viewed as mortals who became gods because they just willed it. And not because they were born with an incredible athletic skill set. And again, it's not just because of their athletic ability. It is their hard work. It's their dedication, all that kind of stuff. But in both cases, and especially with Kobe had like an intentional sort of way of dispelling his own athleticism. People were like, he wasn't the tallest guy. He wasn't the most athletic. No, he was athletic as shit. Are you joking? He was 6'6" with like really good handle. Of course, he had great footwork and all that, but Kobe could jump out of the gym.
Insane. And
great hand-eye coordination too. You know, he's not Gerald Green.
Right. He had a defined skill set at a very young age. He was a genius. He was a savant, you know?
Exactly. You worked harder before you were 17, and that's what got you to the NBA? Bullshit. You were in the NBA at 17.
Yeah.
It didn't happen because you worked really hard between age 15 and 16. Right. Get out of here.
Right. Those like concerto pianists who drop in at age 17. You're just like, I just worked harder than everybody.
At 9, I was just in the gym all day, and that's why I'm in the NBA. Get out of here.
And it's like, it goes back to our Gabrielle Hamilton discussion and this is a deeply American idea, right? It's just like, no, I did not have an advantage. I pulled up my bootstraps. I mean, our president is like, I came from nothing. I'm like, okay, what are we doing now? Like,
it's also Jordan saying, I got cut from my high school team.
Right. Like, what?
And that's why I'm great today. Well, not really.
Yeah.
You also sprouted like 7 inches.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden were 6'6" with guard skills and could also jump out of the gym and had crazy wingspan. Like, it wasn't because that one time when you were in 10th grade, someone said you couldn't be on the team.
Yeah.
And that's not why Jordan is Jordan.
I know. And it's like on a scalable Napoleon complex, because you hear Shaq be like, I've been Diesel my whole life, baby. You know, it's like dominating since day one. I'm like, yes, this is funny. And Kobe has to be like, well, I didn't have Shaq's, you know, his gifts of his height and size. I'm like,
I just had much better coordination and quickness and speed and leaping ability.
Right. Yeah, I mean, but I get it because, you know, like, this is the way humans have to motivate themselves.
And I'm also not saying these guys didn't have incredible work ethic and that their greatness is not in part due to the fact that they worked hard. Of course it is. Yeah. They worked really hard. And all these guys do. They work super hard. It is a demanding, meritocratic. Is that right?
Meritocrat.
You
lost me.
Yeah, that. Yeah, that. To be on that level, you have to mix physical ability and hard work, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just too hard otherwise, unless you're 7'2", which is another genetic lottery.
Yeah.
But man, these guys are also absolutely incredible athletes, and like it's almost unfair to take them at their word that it's all effort.
It's Trumpian, right? You take them at their word for...
I'm saying it's almost unfair to them. Like, we should also be appreciating them for being just incredible historic athletes too.
Yeah, and it's tough, right? It's tough what kind of stories we respond to as fans of anything. And I think it's easier to get with like the rags to riches thing. The riches to riches thing isn't as interesting. But when you're dealing with the NBA, like we talked about, nobody gets to play in the NBA. So all of you guys are already rich. Like Jeremy Lin, JJ Barea, you guys like won the lottery. And like your place in the NBA is deserved. And I think that it's such an exclusive community that I always forget that they have to manufacture the stories of like, well, you know, no one thought I could do it. I'm like, oh... Everyone around you thought you could do it, to be honest.
My thing is that I'm not blaming MJ and Kobe for falling into this trap. It's, as you said, this is coming from above them. Right. It's some human, American cultural thing where it's about being self-made and saying, I was born a billionaire and I ended up a billionaire. You're like, good for you, dude.
Yeah.
It's just the same way someone has to say, yeah, I was born with a 40-inch vertical and I was 6'9", but no, it wasn't that. It was that I had to do it myself. I'm self-made. LeBron saying, who would have ever thought that a kid from Akron could have done this? And you are right. The odds are against you because those odds are against everyone, and especially coming from the community you were in and the background you were in and everything you had against you. But you did have one advantage. is that you were the best athlete that anyone had ever seen.
Right.
You know, and it's the same way that every American needs to have their own mythology. They need to have a bootstrap story because no one likes it otherwise.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel good, and whether that be conditioning or something else, it just the idea of incentive and accomplishing something is like the driving force behind everything, and that's why this time is so awkward, right? Because we're frantically squirreling away ideas and trying to be productive, and we don't really know what the world is going to look like when we open our doors, and who knows what we're working for. We can't even recognize it, and I don't know.
And just to be clear, I am not comparing being born with physical gifts to being born a billionaire. Very, 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 very different things. And the NBA guys are hard workers and they earn it and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm just pointing at the mythology of the United States. In no way is there a comparison about just being born with the ability to jump and now you're in the NBA. It's not that.
No.
It's not that.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about that idea that you can kind of never take credit for your own athleticism if you are a basketball star.
Yeah. And I get really stony about it too. I think people who are driven like Kobe and Jordan, who are so unique, that's a talent too that is unteachable. Like, oh, you were born with this drive. That is as important as being able to jump out of the building.
Yeah. Again, I think it's a combination of those things. It's just that we don't ever hear from them about how good they are at jumping. like when you never see MJ say, well, the thing was, I could just jump and end up like a foot above everyone. And I realized that was good for basketball. It's always like, then I knew I had to win.
Yeah.
And after I had that loss, it really reinforced my need to win.
Yeah.
Which then led me to victory.
I can't wait for the first person to respond to a question like, tell me about the hard work it took to get here. You're a champion. Like what did you do to dig down deep and recover from this injury or whatever? And I want the person to just be like, I was born just the way I am, and I just responded to how I've always responded to everything.
Look, I have a ton of respect for the guys who play on a high level for a really long time, because that to me is a testament to hard work, to dedication, to sticking with it, because you've gotten your money, you've lost your youthful springs and your ability to just kind of get knocked down and hop back up. And we're talking about guys who were in the NBA in their teens. And when you see Kobe and LeBron still playing well, into their 30s, as someone who has lived past that age of life, like, well, goddamn, that is impressive. That is a testament to your conditioning and your lifestyle, that you can still be that good as, say, LeBron James is after that kind of mileage. That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
That's way more impressive than the sort of fiction of it was hard work that got me to the NBA at age 18.
Yeah. I mean, there's the joy in Corey Brewer. I'm running out of talent, right? It's in a nutshell. And that's why D'Antoni thought it was so memorable and funny and had to tell us that story. It's like, I had it all there, coach, and I just ran out of talent.
Speaking of running out of talent, I think we're done for the week.
Oh, we just ran out of talent. Oh,
I think that was it.
Nice. Oh, I thought, okay, just then.
So next week, what we're going to talk about is that MSG is rerunning Linsanity. So we're going to talk about that next week.
Can I put that into a syringe and inject that into my veins?
I would expect no less. Also, new Cookies merch.
That's right.
Man's best friend. Humans can't play basketball anymore. Now it's just for dogs. The new Buddies collection is on cookieshoops.com. There are hats, crew necks, and a dog sleeve. So check those out. They came out really nice.
Not only are we dogs on the pod, we're dogs in the merch game.
Cookies.
Cookies.